No one in this world can you trust. Not men, not women, not beasts. This you can trust.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Glory of Golden State Gaming. I'm your host, Swamp Swimmer, and with me, as always, the Games Workshop to my Wizards of the Coast, Vespacian.
That's a great one. Wow, you know, these are never ending. Hi, everybody. Good to see you.
I just recently made a video about some recent information about the old world, so I was just thinking of Games Workshop. That's what I thought of it. But, you know, we alluded to this last episode, last battle report. I know there's very spotty information currently at the time, but the Henry Cavill Warhammer 40k Amazon Prime show. This is gonna be a lot of speculation, but what are your initial thoughts? I have a few, but I want to hear your first. Like I think Henry Cavill's gonna be, whatever you think. Tell me.
I think that the Games Workshop 40k IP is excellent, but I think that finding the right entry point so that it doesn't just appeal to the Warhammer 40k community, right? But appeals more broadly to kind of sci-fi enthusiasts and ideally gains that kind of even broader appeal, right? You know, like Game of Thrones is probably aspirational, but you know, something like, you know, there's lots of like The Expanse and like other sci-fi shows, if they're done right, where they kind of strike that connection point with, you know, I don't know, the human part of the story.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. I mean, I think there's plenty of places I think they could find to slot in, but the pick of what story arc, how do they make it relatable? How do they do real character building and not just lots of CG and blow them up kind of stuff? I think that's the art of launching this successfully. I hope they can do it. I think there's a lot of potential, but there's also probably a lot of risk.
You nearly stole the words out of my mouth. I'm excited. It's coming out as a series. I'm excited. Henry Cavill's running it because Henry Cavill seems great. You're right. The Warhammer 40k IP it's awesome. It's unique. It's different. And it's beloved by a lot of people. And even me, I like to dog on 40k as a tabletop game, but like the IP is freaking awesome. And my one concern is, how do you translate this to an actual dramatic action show where it's not all just a grim dark future? Because I haven't read a whole lot of the books, but it seems like the 40k IP is just steeped in grim dark like badassness, you know, like people dying, demons. There's not a lot of human connection. There's not a lot of human stories, human emotion in there. That's my one concern, is how well can one group of creative people translate Warhammer 40k tabletop IP, which is badass and cool, to a dramatic, engaging show. Can it be done? Certainly. Will it be done? I don't know. But I'm gonna check it out. My ticket has been bought for this ride. I'm going.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll go along for the ride. and I'll probably like it.
Mm-hmm.
The question for me is, can they get it hooked into a broader audience so that it becomes kind of a successful franchise, and you know, and all of that. So yeah.
Hey, if you're watching and you've got comments, if you're watching and you have comments that you really need us to know about what you think of this show, hit me up in the comments section. I actually want to hear all of them. But today we're talking about a battle report, and it's round 2 of ETC. Round 1, you guys successfully didn't cap, but almost capped Team Canada. You got paired into Team Ireland, which is awesome. And you specifically get paired into You're gonna help me with pronouncing this name. The Irish names are a little bit rough for me. Is it Care?
I think it's Car or Cara, something like that. I probably butchered it, but yeah, I think it's Car.
Car. We're probably butchering your name, but I apologize. But I'm excited you get to be on this battle report. You are playing VC again, a double back-to-back VC game. This is round 2, as I said, and it is Dawn Assault, King of the Hill. Let's see here. If you are interested in Vespasian's list, please click the link right above my head. It'll take you to the Scrimmage 1 video where we go over his list in a little more detail. But against the VC, let's zoom in here, you have... Okay, so a Vampire Count this time. Shrieking Horror, Wizard Apprentice, Occultism, Paired Weapons, Kingslayer, Crystal Ball, Strigoi, Mesmerizing Gaze. This is the on-foot, badass vampire killy guy. Basically.
Yeah, you can't get a lot killier than that model. Right?
Oh no, he's I'm sorry, he's on the
Kingslayer.
He's on the Shrieking Horror. This is the big bad on the Shrieking Horror.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a scary model. That's a scary model. We got a Courtier. This is the general on a steed. Adept on Evocation. Destiny's Called, Pair Weapon, Nosferatu. Another Courtier on a steed. Shamanism, BSB. Essence of Mithril, Pair Weapon, Only Holy Tome, Nosferatu, Mysteries of the Night. Then we have a big block of ghouls, 2 small blocks of zombies, dire wolves, 2x2 bat swarms, a big block of 10 barrow knights, 10 spectral hunters, yikes, with a champion. They have the upgrade with the wizard. 10 race without the champion upgrade. And a big old second Shrieking Horror. So 2 Shrieking Horrors, one of which is a character, 2 spectral units, a race and the hunters, and then a barrow knight unit.
Yeah.
And in your pregame analysis, you put this as a yellow.
Yeah, I put this as a yellow. I saw this as ending up kind of looking or feeling like a standoffishy match. I think that while that count is very, very strong, he doesn't want the Lion Chariot Prince or the Nova Griff, and he's a huge whack of points. So I thought that he'd play a bit cagey with him. I have a lot of shooting, so if the horrors come out, they have to get through probably a turn or 2 of that before they can do a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And I also, that Black Knight or the Barrow Knight bus, those two characters are not that fighty. So
yeah,
again, I saw, I thought that this was like one of those situations where he would be quite scared of the Nova Griff. And the race and the Spectral Hunters effectively protect and the horrors effectively protect his flank. So I saw this as a pretty standoffishy match. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Let's see here. So this first picture is the pairings. Let me get this centered in the screen here.
Yeah.
There we go.
So Ireland was an interesting one. Their lists, again, I said some teams' lists felt fairly predictable. Ireland was not one of those teams. They had some very interesting lists. The VC list, I think there was only one other Strigoi count on a horror in the whole tournament.
Yeah.
There was they had a kind of the old school Skink Cloud list piloted by Colin, their Saurian ancient list that was just like tons and tons and tons of skink units and poison shooting and that kind of stuff. They had I think they had was it double Colossus UD list. So there was a bunch of lists that were just a little bit off meta.
Yeah.
And I think we were a bit nervous about some of those matchups, and so it made pairing a little bit challenging. This was although it was a yellow, we also ranked our matches, so you kind of have 2 ways to think about it. Like one yellow isn't necessarily identical to another yellow, right? So this was one of my worst ranked matchups, even though it was a yellow. I think there was one that was worse than this. That was an orange, I think. But long story short, from a pairing perspective, we were trying to get a couple of matches. We really wanted to try to get the UD and the Dread Elves. We felt like that was one of the few good matchups for our Dread Elf list, so we were happy to get that. Let me think about this. The Orc and Goblin list, this was very interesting. It had lots of small feral Orc Boar Boy units. I'm not sure if you remember seeing that one. Very unique list. Most of us felt pretty confident against that, so we were hoping to get a good matchup on that one. And I think, I'm just trying to think what the other one was. That Warriors list, we were really happy to get that VC into the Warriors list, basically. We felt like that was a really strong matchup. The rest, we knew their Sylvan Elf list was real tough, and so we were actually, I think, pretty happy to get that into our UD list with, lots of bodies, lots of raising, good range damage. We thought could stand up pretty well on that Sylvan list. So I think overall, we one thing that comes up, is very often both teams finish the pairings happy with the outcome, right? So that means that there's some asymmetry in the ratings, and so there must have been some asymmetry. There must have been some asymmetry here because we came in quite nervous about this pairing process. I think not nervous, but like we saw some pitfalls, and we ended up feeling like we did pretty well overall. So
did Ireland also say they were happy with these matchups?
I think that they were actually I'm not remembering if I talked about it. Actually, I can't remember.
Okay, fair enough. Let's see. This is Magic. So let's look at his. This is not the clearest, but we'll try.
He's got some sort of different. This is a little bit of an odd VC Magic phase, right? It's lots of little adepts. So he's got Breath of Corruption on the big horror, right? He took Whispers and Raven's Wing on the Spectral Hunters. He took the two buffs, I think, Ancestral Aid and Spectral on the Evo guy. It looks like
Ancestral Aid and Spectral, and then the Shamanism guy took Awaken the Beast and just Awaken the Beast.
And
Ash Scarification.
Yeah. So one thing that I noticed was he did have he had the two baby casters were Nosferatu, right? So he was basically relying on their heals. So I thought that was interesting because that meant he would need to play quite close to that bunker, right? The Black Knight bunker, because he had no heal elsewhere, right? Like I thought he was going to take the heal on the big horror so that he could go and play by himself a little bit more, but didn't. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then for me, I took, it looks like Hereditary, Perception of Strength, Unity, Touch, and Ice and Fire.
Touch, that's the last one. Okay.
So in this one, I did end up taking Perception because the horror is res 6, which means that there's a decent, likelihood of bouncing with the strength 6 on the two characters. And so I thought Perception was an important must stop for him if that combat ever ended up happening. And obviously the Ice and Fire and the Unity are both, great for the anti-ethereal stuff. So anyways,
Makes sense. Okay, this is Deployment and Vanguard, and this is King of the Hill. So we've got, I see one token here. There's the other one. There's the one's in the water there. Okay.
So this was one of those rare occasions where I actually would have been happy to win the roll for sides, because Dawn Assault on this table is actually with King is actually really hard, because on the side of the table that he put me on, both the ruins and the hill are fully within my deployment zone, so not eligible, right? So I would have he chose exactly right, And I this is one of those rare games where I used the fleet officer's +1 roll to win the roll for sides.
Oh, interesting.
And I lost it, unfortunately. Because I would have loved to have put him on this side, because my only eligible terrain features for King were that field in the middle, which against a big vampire, my scoring does not stand up super well, right? So against a big vampire list with lots of bodies, I didn't want to pick the middle. The forest that he's literally on right now, right back in the middle of his deployments, or that water feature, right, which is a terrible selection of choices to pick, right?
Very true.
I ended up picking the water feature, and actually something I rarely do, I ambushed, which you can do in Dawn Assault.
No one ever does that.
Yeah. Rarely ever do it, but in this case, I saw that as really my only viable possibility of getting onto that objective, because I think if I pick the field, at least the way I thought this matchup was going to show up, I think if I pick the field, it's quite in his favor, right? Mm-hmm. He can concentrate, he has more bodies, he can heal a lot of stuff, right? So I saw that as being really in his favor. And I thought that if he tried to go aggressively at me, I might have a shot at going after that water feature, basically. So there were no good options. I think that I took the one that had the highest kind of upside, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
So trying to make the best out of a bad situation, I dropped the first, right? Mm-hmm. And you can see on the left, I've got one of the Phoenixes, 2 bolt throwers towed up on the hill, archers on the hill with the mage in them. I've got the Nova Griff. Remember, I'm dropping first, so I don't know where he's at yet. I've got the one of the Sea Guard units, Grey Watchers, bolt thrower in the back, Lion Chariot Prince, other Sea Guard unit, Flame Phoenix, and Reaper Chariots. So
and then
my thinking was here.
The knights are on the table, but they're ambushed.
They're on an impassable there, just so that I don't forget about them, because I never use ambush in this army, so it was a very high chance I would forget. So I basically my thinking was, he's likely just going to go right in the center, right? I thought that that having the chariots and the Phoenix over on the right hand side, I would then have the support units I might need to support the Lancers kind of up that flank, mm-hmm. if he went too aggressively in the middle. And I wanted my 2 princes sort of central, so that I would be able to set up my zones, kind of overlapping and covering the whole center for turn 1.
Yeah.
And then the other Phoenix on the left-hand side, because if he doesn't put something over there to zone it, I can pop up behind that impassable and then be in a great position for turn 2 onward. So, and then a shooting base essentially right across the sort of back left of my zone.
Gotcha.
With all that. So, yeah.
We'll see.
And then over. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
So over on his side, he's got a unit of zombies there in the front, his wraiths behind them, unit of bats, Black Knights with both of the skeletal steed characters, so the BSB and the general, unit of dogs, which he vanguarded up, and another unit of bats, unit of zombies back there, the big unit of ghouls, spectral hunters, and then the 2 shrieking horrors. And it's quite apparent. I think the one furthest out with the little guy, yeah, there he is, little guy on his back. That's the count. Yeah, there you go.
All right, let's see how this goes. So
really pretty army.
Yeah, the models look great. You said you dropped to go first, so turn 1 is your movement.
Yeah, so I go for what I said I would go for, bring the princess up to zone. Essentially, I've got 2 priorities this turn. The first is start putting wounds through on the horrors. That as soon as they start taking wounds, the magic phase becomes healing them, right, rather than doing magical moves and stuff like that. So put wounds through on the horrors, and then the other big priority is kill that unit of dogs, which he has left out in the open, right? And I've got lots of dog killing stuff in my army, so that was a top priority for me. And I think we'll double check on the picture, but I end up getting the dogs with shooting and I think maybe an ice and fire, and I'm able to do I can't remember exactly, but I do actually a decent amount of work on the non-count horror. I think I do like 2 or 3 wounds to it. So then you see what he goes for.
Yeah, this is bottom of 1.
Yeah, so honestly, this if you had asked me what I thought his first turn movement was going to look like, this would have been probably the lowest likelihood. He pushes.
Yeah, he pushes
all the way up.
The night bus right in the center. I think he had
right
a lot of. He has a lot of confidence in the night bus.
Both my princes can see him. A lot of basically this is a very proactive move. He does pull, so I think you can see now I did 3 wounds to that horror, the 3 little red dots next to it. Yeah. So he pulls the horror, the unmounted horror back, right, in healing range. So as I predicted, and he brings everything up, and essentially, this turn creates a little bit of an odd situation for him because of how aggressive he's been. Because I killed his dogs, and his bats were not able to move up all the way, he needs to get a magical move off to move the bats up to chaff my huntsman prince, because taking 2 princes into that brick is not a good time for him. So what happens is I let off a heal on the horror, which I think he didn't expect. And then I stopped both of his magical moves on the bats.
I think that's 100% the right move,
yeah. And like, because to me, I'm looking at this and I'm like, look, a couple wounds on a horror. I mean, obviously it's not great, but if I can pick up the general and the BSB and the Black Knight bus in what is essentially like turns 2 and 3, that's game.
Well,
right?
in theory, both of those princes into this night bus will probably wipe it out, and then you overrun, in theory, into the wounded horror. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's a little hard to see here, but if you zoom in, the bats are just slightly in front of that knight unit.
Okay, yeah.
And I have my blue Sea Guard over on the right have a front charge into the bats, which would then turn into a flank charge into the Black Knight bus.
Yeah.
Right. So this is, I think this is a game winner. And I take my coach's timeout at the top of 2 movement, which is, usually you want to wait. So because one of the key pieces of intel your coach can give you is how are the other team members doing.
Yeah.
But I saw this as such a transformational move in the game that I felt like I wanted to just be like, look, is there something I'm missing here? Right. Because it feels like I had a shot at a big win right away. So I take my coach's timeout, we talk about it, and now you can see, I'm pretty sure next picture is mine.
Yeah, this is top of 2.
So if you zoom in, we decide to go for it. I make all the charges, I activate my reavers to chaff the ghouls, and I think this is game over, basically. And so then in my magic phase, my top priority is buffing that combat. He sensibly stops perception of strength buff on, I think I want to say it was on the Nova Griff. Basically, just because I just wanted to make absolutely sure that I murdered that general when I went in, because if I don't, it becomes a real problem. And so I think he stopped that, and so I was able to get up the hereditary, right, which is huge, because combat res is massive in the VC combats, right?
Yeah.
And so then in that combat, some things go well, but other things don't go well. So the Nova Griff one-shots his general, which obviously getting a VC army to crumble from turn 2 onward is a fantastic huge deal.
Yeah.
Also losing 2 of his heals, huge deal, right? So super happy.
Before you get to this combat, what happens with the Sea Guard and Bats combat? What happens with the Sea Guard and Bats combat?
Yeah. So basically, the Sea Guard go in and they wipe out the Bats and overrun into the flank.
Okay, perfect. All right, so they made it in.
So this is amazing for so many different reasons, because the big one is I have a champion who can then take the champion challenge from the Black Knights, right? Which means both of my princes are free to go, right?
To just annihilate,
So huge, and then on top of the charge, flank, big flank, rank, right? I mean, the amount of combat res is absolutely massive. So I'm pretty excited about this. Starts off well with that happening, continues to go well with the Nova Griff taking off the general. But what I didn't predict was that the Huntsman Prince completely flubbed. And this is, D6 plus 1 impact hits, wounding on 3s, 5 strength 6 attacks, 4 strength 5 attacks. It's a massive amount of damage. I think I do 1 or 2 wounds. And there's no buffs, right? So this is basically open season, totally fails to do anything. The Sea Guard also completely failed to do anything, and unfortunately he manages to do he's got 5 attacks to the flank or 6 or something like that, and he does basically wounds with all of them. And so while I get the general and I generate a massive amount of combat res, I don't actually pop the unit. So he has 1 or 2 Black Knights and the BSB left, essentially. So this was not the end of the world. I still have it chaffed, but it's not the overwhelming result that I thought it was going to be, and I think that it should have been. I think the odds are. I mean, I would love to have the math CD, percentage likelihood, but I think that the massive percentage likelihood is that I just blow right through that unit and take out the horror behind it, and it's game, right? So, but anyway, so here we go. So in other news, I believe my shooting, and this is probably mainly just because of all of the stuff I have in front of it, I think my shooting essentially starts turning towards that other Shrieking Horror, the one with the character on it. And I don't think I do too hot. I think I do 1, maybe 2 wounds, but not a massive issue. So anyways, this is also top of 2. Did your knights come on in this corner down here on the right, or are they? Yes, sorry. Yeah, they did. I would have loved for them to have come on later, but they did come on, so I had to put them in a pretty conservative spot. But they move 18, plenty of time to get out over to the water feature.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, next, this is top of 3, so this is a whole turn later. We're missing the bottom of turn 2.
Yeah, so apologies for that.
No.
So
don't feel bad.
2,
This is ETC. Don't feel bad.
Yeah,
it's high concentration.
Yeah.
But
So in turn 2, I make a mistake, which is so this is what he does. He charges into the flank of my Sea Guard with his Shrieking Horror, right? Makes a lot of sense. He can generate a lot of combat res.
This Shrieking Horror to this, over here.
No, the one in the back. So you get a picture, that Sea Guard unit is kind of spun around to the flank of the Black Knights,
yeah,
right?
and it comes
he
in
charges
here.
in. Yeah.
Gotcha.
The other thing he does is he takes his zombies into the flank of my huntsman, which honestly, I think that might not have been the best call because I can do a lot of combat res off of those zombies. And admittedly, they bring some combat res in, but I can also just generate a lot, right?
Yeah.
So may not have been the best, but it ties him up, either way. So you got to remember his unit is pretty small. His Black Knight is pretty small at that point. So he may just have been like worried that I do finish him. I do. Then I make a mistake. So then he moves up with his Shrieking Horror with the count. You can see the positioning there, and he brings his wraiths up so that they can do a following turn charge on the Huntsman Prince potentially, or kind of threaten my back line basically. He brings the Spectral Hunters out. Basically now he sees what I'm doing with the Lancers, so he's going to use them to zone and prevent my Phoenix from popping out. So he's got my Phoenix zoned. You can see that the one that's behind the Impassable there. He's got him kind of zoned out with the Hunters. So then I make a mistake and I prioritize stopping the heals on the Black Knight bus, and he casts Shot them Awaken the Beast on the Black Knights. And that is a problem because it means his BSB can only be wounded on 5s.
Yep.
Right. And so that was just like a, sometimes you get into tunnel vision of you got to stop the heals when you're about to finish off a big vampires unit, right? And it didn't occur to me. I mean, the Nova Griff one-shots that guy if that spell isn't off, right?
Yeah.
And that would have made a huge difference. And I made a mistake there. As I knew as soon as he picked up the dice to cast the spell, I was like, because I had already used all my dice in the heal. So dumb move by Aaron there. Could have done better. And then that combat goes terribly. The Horror racks up a ton of wounds on the Seaguard.
On the Seaguard.
I fail to kill his BSB. I think I only do 1 wound. And he, between the Horror's combat res and the fact that the Nova Griff doesn't do anything, even though the Huntsman does rack up a decent amount of work on those zombies, I end up losing that combat by 1, and the Nova Griff fails his non-reroll check and flees. And so now I'm looking at this and I'm like, I thought that I had what was essentially an automatic 20, less than a turn ago, and now it's starting to look quite bad. But I try to do some things to recover. So my Nova Griff has used his Lance activation, right? The one time. So he can't fight that Horror with the count on it. Yeah. So I set up a fleet path myself. You can see there.
End up right there.
Not a very subtle one, but it does what it needs to do. I debated this a lot, but I end up charging my Seaguard with my mage into the flank of those zombies. And my reasoning was I didn't think I was likely to kill them. And that's an enormous amount of combat res that I bring into that combat because I have charge, flank,
big flank, 2 ranks. Yeah.
Right. And so I was prepared for that. I take the Phoenix into the flank of the Wraiths, right? He has no general anymore. Wraiths leadership is terrible. So it's likely that he won't be able to reform after that combat. I do 4 attacks, D6 grinds, D6 thunder stomps, even though it's not magical, like you fail some 3-ups, right? Yeah. And so with charge, flank, I figured over time I would win that combat.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
And so that's basically where I'm at. And so now you see, essentially my turn 3. So I think if we then go into, I don't think I did too much else. In this turn, my top priority was shooting at that count. and I do get a few wounds off on him. And now remember, he's only got 1 heal left, I think. And so, you know, it's actually becomes a big and he's also crumbling on the non-vampire unit, right? So the horror is taking a wound every one of his turns, right? The wraiths are taking wounds every one of his turns, right? So every little bit helps. And I think I punched through a couple of wounds on the horror, the count horror. And what ends up happening in the combat is I actually do end up wiping out the zombies, which is a shame. I was hoping they would hang on, but they don't. I think I do finish off the Black Knights with the Huntsman, which is good.
Okay, yeah.
And he finishes off the Sea Guard unit.
With
essentially,
with the horror.
All of a sudden, this big chain-linked combat has completely dissolved because the only thing left in combat is the Huntsman, right?
The Huntsman with the BSB.
Correct. Yeah. So that's fine. In other news, the Phoenix does exactly what I needed to do, which is does like 1 or 2 wounds, crumbles the wraiths a little bit, and they fail their reform check on may not have even been able to pass it because their leadership was so low. And so I'm happy with that. So now we can fast forward to the next one, which I think is sequential.
Bottom of 3.
Yeah, so you can see I did a couple wounds there on the horror. They're kind of poking out behind his butt over there.
Yeah.
And his oh no, that's right. The Huntsman Prince fully came out of contact with the BSB because of the zombies. So there was no combat left. I forgot about that. Yeah. So what he does is he charges first my Griffin, right, with his horror, which I obviously flee.
Yeah, ends up here.
And then he charges my Mage Bunker as well. And yeah, and this was I got a little lucky here. I needed to not roll real low with that bunker because he could have potentially caught them if I rolled a 3 or something like that. But I roll fairly high, which triggers me. I was at a slight angle, and so it manages to get me past the Phoenix, right out over there, and out of his range. So he has double flee, no eligible pursuit targets. So he just pursues after the mage to kind of keep his horror relevant in the middle there.
Yeah.
He brings his other horror over to shriek at my Huntsman. He brings his BSB back for some kind of flexible charges, and he turns his ghouls to face, the Huntsman. And so he doesn't do much. Again, that horror in the back there is damaged. It's taken a few wounds, and I'm discipline 10. So he doesn't do much to the Huntsman. I think maybe he does nothing. And so then I do fail my panic check on my on my bolter. That's what that little purple thing there is. From the flea, but I mean it is what it is. And so now he's positioning his spectral hunters. He's still using them to zone my Phoenix and my Lancers from coming up. And so now I have an interesting choice. And so in my turn, I decide to do this. He's chaffing my Huntsman so that he can't go into the Ghoul King there. So I decide to put my Flame Phoenix, who's been behind that impassable this whole time, into the rear, and my Reaver Chip into the flank Ghoul King, right?
And he has 2-3 wounds on him or something like that.
Yeah, he's got 2. I think he's got 2 wounds on him too. Now neither of those are characters, so he can't do that force challenge thing, right? Yeah. And I've got 2d6 strength 5 impact hits. I've got a bunch of flaming attacks, right? And I've got a charge and a rear, right? Yeah. 3 combat res, which means I really just need to do a couple of wounds, right? And then the horror basically doesn't do anything because he's just got a couple shrieks left, and I'm disciplined 10. And then the king would need to. He's not getting any bonus from the Kingslayer, so the king would really need to show up, basically do like full conversion to survive that. As long as I do a couple wounds. So those who've been watching this channel for a while, I have zero faith in my Reaver Chariots. I expect them to roll like double ones and just completely flub, right? So I thought this was a pretty rough spot to be in, but it is what it is. I rally the Griffin and the Spunker. I move the Grey Watchers up. And the main reason I did this was to prevent his ghouls from essentially like running forward and either charging my mage bunker or getting into the Flame Phoenix and then overrunning into the mage bunker. There were some options that he had, so I just needed to kind of gum up the space in the middle, and the Grey Watchers were there. The Huntsman Prince pulls over. I guess he did take a couple wounds now that I look at it. Huntsman Prince pulls over, and basically what he's saying is, look, regardless of how this combat ends up, I'm going to kill that guy next turn if he doesn't die this turn, basically. So he's got the center of that model who's engaged to the rear, so he can't pull away. He's got the center of that model in his line of sight. Yeah. That's about it. You can see the Phoenix continues to do work on those wraiths, right? They're down.
Yeah. You're winning this combat over here. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this turn, my top priority from a shooting perspective, from a magic perspective, is he has to stop Reception of Strength on the chariots for obvious
of course.
reasons. Right? Yeah. He stopped that. And I think maybe I do like Ice and Fire. Now I'm wondering. Oh no, I heal the Huntsman, and I get off the Hereditary, basically, and then because he stops Perception in the shooting phase, I kill the Horror in the center. I think we can double check that with the next picture, but I think I finished it off. And with the crumble and I think it was only down to a couple of wounds left.
Yeah, it started adding up. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in the combat, I do it.
Woo!
So
did you do it just with impact hits?
Yeah. The Reaver Chariots did well. And in fact, I don't even think the Horror got to swing. So I think the Count swings. I think I'm pretty sure of that. Yes, he does. He swings and he kills one Reaver Chariot outright, so 3 wounds. Right, done. But the Reaver Chariots did 2 wounds, and then the Phoenix does the other 2 wounds with his attacks and grinds and just takes it off, which is obviously an enormous deal. So I think, and we can double check, but I think that means I got both Horrors this turn and the Big Ghoul King. So tons of points and a lot of flexibility.
Let's see.
And I think I may have even finished off the race this turn, if I recall correctly.
Let's see what the next pick. This is end of top of 4.
Yeah. So now you can see the end of the end of the process. So I don't finish the wraiths. I guess I must not have gotten the Horror. Yes, that's right. I got both the wraiths and the Horror down to 1 wound, which means then they crumble and die at the beginning.
At the beginning of his turn. Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's misremembered, but you can see I got the Hereditary up there, and then even better, I managed a fairly short. I think it was like an 8-7-8 overrun with the last Reaver Chariot into the flank of the ghouls, tying them up
just to peg them in space into place. Yeah.
Just to peg them, and now obviously, like, things went a little topsy-turvy there in the prior couple of turns, but it was at this turn that the pendulum swung back, I think, pretty decisively, because with both horrors gone, the wraiths gone, the ghouls pinned, I've got a lot of options. So now we can go on to his turn.
So this is bottom of 4.
Yeah.
Yep, those. Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah, the 2 horrors are gone over there. So a couple things happen here. If you go back, it might be easier to show what happened. That may have been why I took the other picture. So basically, with the Wraith and the Horror gone, his BSB has a lot of different charging options. I flee with the Phoenix because I'm far enough away on the left. He charges far enough away that I mean that BSB will kill the Phoenix almost undoubtedly. So I flee there.
Yeah.
Get away. He charges the Grey Watchers. They were so close that I felt he was going to catch them anyways and get even closer to my line. So I was happy to have him kill the Grey Watchers in those. So I stand that charge.
Mm-hmm.
He charges the Spectral Hunters into my Phoenix on the right.
Oh, here.
Because they have ghost steps, so they can wheel through that thing, that impassable. To be honest, I was pretty happy with this, and then my Phoenix I think rolls a 1-1-2 and flees almost not at all, and then now you can fast forward and he
catches them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, which is a shame. I mean, average, I think that would not have happened, but it turned out. So it is what it is. His BSB gets in, and he's now the one.
And he also charges the flank of your Sea Guard with the bat.
With my bats. That was mainly to pin me because he's thinking he can pin me there. Then his BSB can finish off the Grey Watchers and then go in and maybe assassinate my mage in the following turn. Right? So then in this turn, I think he gets the Reaver Chariot with the ghouls. Pretty sure that he does. He certainly gets the Grey Watchers with the BSB. His bats do pin me, over on the left. He moves his zombies up just to basically, now my Lancers can move forward now that his Wraiths are out of the way.
Yeah.
So he moves his zombies up to get in the way and prevent me from getting into the water feature. So then and I think we jump a full turn here, so I'll explain what happens. So he all that happens, and then I've got a Vampire BSB, the only remaining caster. No, that's not true. The Hex Race out of caster. That guy overruns because he's got like a 10 or something to get into my mage's bunker, doesn't make it, and now that BSB is sitting out in the middle of the field with 3 bolt throwers in short range. And he just has Essence of Mithril, if I recall correctly. He doesn't have an Aegis. So then in my turn, I rally the Phoenix on the left. I finish off the bats on the left, and I kill the BSB with single bolts in the middle of the field. And I move the Lancers as far up as they can go, and so now you can advance to the next picture.
Yeah, bottom of 5.
Yeah. So, I guess I didn't quite get the bats, but they're on just like 1 wound or something. So now in his following turn, he turns the Hex Race around, right? The Spectral Hunters around to threaten my Lancers moving up, right? He's trying to accomplish a couple of things here with the ghouls. He wants to continue to hold the field. Remember, that's he wants to prevent me from getting. He wants to get into the field.
He wants to prevent you from getting into. Yeah, he wants to get into this field.
He wants to prevent me from getting scoring units into the field, which he basically has. But he's kind of positioning the ghouls that way. But he also wants to stop me from getting the Huntsman Prince into the rear of the Hex Race. So that I can't get my my Lancers over there to finish off those zombies, essentially. And then So that's the move that he makes. You know, it is what it is. And then I think we've got one more picture.
Yeah, let's see here. And this is top of 6.
Yeah. Yeah, so I put both princes into the ghouls. I also put the Flame Phoenix into the ghouls, but I can't quite make it.
Yeah. It's a long charge.
I failed to charge. I also charge with the Sea Guard and the Lancers as well over on the zombies over there. I charged with the Sea Guard because I was out of 10 inches from the field, but if I connected the charge, I would be in it. Yeah. Right. So this was I didn't think that things were going to kind of fall apart. I should have been moving my my scoring units up, and so I ended up with this sort of low chance possible outcome. Would have been nice to have made that and win the objective, but it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And so then basically in my turn, my priority is to try to get rid of those hex wraiths so that they couldn't rescue the zombies in time for them to post-combat pivot onto the water.
Yep.
And so I managed to, I think I just straight up diced him. I think I threw all of my dice at Ice and Fire, and he didn't manage to stop it. And I do exactly enough to the hex wraiths that he will crumble the last wound. So I leave the champion on 1 wound so that he'll crumble the last wound in his turn 6. So it was like the perfect outcome. I did exactly what I needed to do. And in my turn, I don't quite finish off the ghouls, but then in his turn I do. Okay. And in his turn I also managed to finish off the zombies. So at the end of the game, the very bottom of turn 6, I have tabled him.
Wow.
4,900 points.
Wow. But you did not.
But I don't manage to get the objective.
If you just would have made that charge with this Sea Guard unit. But yeah, you tabled him, but you did not get the secondary, so that leaves you with a 17.
Yeah.
So looking back at the game, I think the crazy charge he gives you in the center. Yeah. You had to have taken it. Like I don't blame you at all for taking it. It didn't work out really, and you gotta you ended up cleaning it up in the end. But man, if the dice had been average there, you would have blown through that unit, and then it just would have been game over. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I think 100%. It was they made less impactful the crumble mechanic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I'll tell you, if you trigger it like before their turn 2, across 5 turns, it's pretty impactful, right? So essentially, the Shrieking Horror was essentially on borrowed time as soon as I killed that general, right? Because he can't really keep up to keep it alive, right? Wraiths, same thing. So that helped a ton. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if I get that unit and overrun and take off the Shrieking Horror, I think it's an unqualified 20 at that point. I don't know what he does to bring it back. Yeah. But it still ended up being pretty strong win. I think it was the right move regardless of the situation, for sure. Definitely. And then after that, the beast. Yeah, that was a huge mistake. I would have because he was down to 2 Black Knights or Barrow Knights plus the BSB. Yeah. He was trying to heal the Barrow Knights, which have a raise value of what, 1 or 2 or 3? I think it's 2. And if you would have let one of the heals through, that means it would have been 5 Barrow Knights. I'm sorry, 4 Barrow Knights left, plus the character. But then you would have one-shotted the character, and the character's more important in that situation.
Interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have caught that either, but
Yeah, it was totally a mistake. I like getting, even if it was 4, right? Like even getting 4 Baronites back, if that BSB vamp is gone, then the rest of the game still goes pretty sensibly forward, right? He loses the other caster, right? It's just he's down to 3 spells, no heals, right? Like, and he's crumbling. Game's over at that point. The fact that he was able to keep that guy alive with the heal and gates available made the magic phases more complicated. I mean, it's just exponential differences, and so yeah, I mean, that was definitely a mistake for sure.
Yeah. Well, hey, big win. How did the team do?
So obviously it helps to get a 17 out of a yellow, right?
Yeah.
And we did end up with a big win, so we ended up capping. So I'm not exactly sure what the uncapped points were, but I think we relatively comfortably capped, maybe like somewhere between like 105, 110, something like that. There were a few matches that didn't quite go the way that we thought, but we ended up getting a number of really big wins out of it. So that all added up, and we ended up with a cap. So we're ending the end of day 1 with 195 points, and
not too shabby.
That puts us, I think that puts us in 2nd place at the end of day 1. Too bad they didn't end there, but
I was following along here in New York in New Recruit, and I'm like, USA 2nd place after day 1? Like what?
Yeah.
But that puts you basically on top table. Who did you get matched into? Which country?
We ended up getting matched into Italy. So this round 3 is a very very interesting round 3. Italy is a kind of perennial contender, right? So they're usually in, I think they were 3rd last year. They're usually in the hunt for top 5, top 3, right? So, and they had capped both of their first 2 opponents, so we were expecting this to be a tough match. Definitely. So yeah, looking forward to the next day.
Well, thanks for joining us. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we will see USA versus Italy round 3 in the next video.
Thanks, everybody.
Until next time.